Hello survivors, Priam here, back with another video, and today I would like to present my hero development guide. This has been in the pipeline for a couple months now. The project originally started as a reference chart, but one thing led to another, and I ended up writing a 43-page in-depth hero development guide. As far as I know, nothing of this depth and caliber has ever been released. I opted to write a guide as opposed to making video guides because it's a lot of information. It would take multiple hours of video time to cover the contents of this guide in its entirety. You can probably read through the guide in under an hour, but it's meant to be a reference guide, so you'll be referring back to this regularly as you develop your heroes. This page is already live on my website. I will include a link in the description below. As well, you can navigate here yourself, going to guide and then hero development, and on this page you'll find the blue download link. So this guide represents the culmination of my experience playing this game over the past 8 months. My intent with this guide is to open your eyes to the intricacies and patterns of heroes. At the time of writing this guide, there are currently 675 states in this game, so there's a wide range of players with their own playstyles and testing methods. As such, the first half of this guide will be purely objective and observational based on what the game provides. The second half will be subjective, containing my own personal analysis of the heroes and their intended use. This is definitely an expert level guide for players at base 25, and builds on information that I have provided in my earlier videos. So without further ado, I present my hero development guide. So clicking on this blue link here, you'll download the file, and this file is a PDF file. This is best viewed on the computer or tablet if possible. It might be a bit small on your phone, but it's still doable as a reference guide. This is the first edition to be released today, October 5th, 2019. I'll probably do additional editions in the future. As they release more heroes, the guide will expand. Same disclaimer as I have in my videos, I don't work for IM30, nor am I affiliated with them. If this ever changes, I will disclose it. The purpose of this guide is to help elevate the level of play. I will try whenever possible to provide information from a neutral standpoint so that you can make informed decisions on your own. Information provided has been gathered from my personal R&D efforts and collective knowledge from Alliance members. Take everything with a grain of salt. So in this guide, I'll be covering unit choice, hero attributes, hero skills, skill range and targets, hero abilities, hero analysis, and finally, hero synergy. I'm not going to sit here and read this out word for word. You guys have the guide so you can read it yourselves. But I just want to highlight a few things in this guide. First and foremost, this is an expert level guide for base 25. And for the purposes of comparison here, everything in this guide assumes you are maxed out. So you have your buildings, tech, VIP store, alliance tech, everything's maxed out. You have the bonuses from cause as well, in the VIP shop, etc., etc. So everything's maxed out. All of the skills that you see are all level 10 skills. Your barracks are maxed out, so you have the most number of troops. Everything's fully maxed. It's just easier to compare that way, because this game at its core is based on a cardinal system. The higher your attributes, the better chances you have at winning. So I'll briefly touch on the unit choices here: fighters, shooters, and vehicles, what their intended uses are. Then I go through covering the attributes, what each attribute does, the skills associated with them, so on and so forth. I highlight a few heroes that have special skills, shall we say, that stand out among the rest, and then we arrive at my first reference chart. As I mentioned earlier, all the skills are maxed out, so these are based on level 10 skills, and that goes for the other reference charts as well. All 3 reference charts contain every hero available to date, starting at SX, which are the current level of heroes for the older states, all the way down to the normal orange heroes you get at the very beginning of the game. This is what I meant by this is probably going to be a reference guide, because you'll be referring back to these charts regularly. So after the attributes, I get into the skills. One important thing to note about the skills is there are 4 skill types: prep, status, combat, and passive. Different skills trigger at different points of the battle. Certain skills can be countered, other skills can't be countered. Some will always trigger with 100% probability, some will have low probability. Some require channeling, which is when you prep for a skill. Some have abilities. That will be covered in the next section. So over the next few pages, you'll see that I have typed out word for word the combat skills from the game. These are skills 2, 5, and 8 respectively, and this goes for every season of Heroes, as well as the type, the range, and number of enemies they target. For the purposes of comparison, I added the number of targets for enemies just to make it easier to compare, because that will come into play during the hero analysis. So this is SX, X4, S3, S2, S1, and regular normal orange heroes. Then I touch on the skill ranges and targets. So when you're setting up your APC, you want your front row to have range 3, middle row to have range 4, and back row to have range 5. As well, something else to consider is how many targets does your skill hit. Does it hit 2 enemies? Does it hit 1 enemy? Does it hit all 3 enemies? Stuff like that. So combining the combat skills and the previous chart for attributes, we have the third reference chart here, which contains all the attributes for numbers, as well as the range of the skills and whether or not they target the enemy or friendly squads, as well as how many squads they target. This will help give you a basic overview of how you compare your heroes, which ones to put where, etc., etc. This is very on tip of the iceberg stuff, because you have to look at individual combat skills before you can assess their synergy with other heroes. The last factor to take into consideration is the triggering frequency, because the more turns you need to prep, the more susceptible you are to counters. So how often does a skill fire? If there's no prep needed, it will fire every turn, potentially, if you're lucky with the probabilities. If it's a 1-turn prep, you could fire it 4 times per round, because there's 8 turns per round. If it's a 2-turn prep, then you can only fire it twice per round. Next up, we have the hero abilities. So everything up to and including page 19 is purely objective and observational from the game. From page 20 onwards, this is subjective. This is my personal analysis. It's less formal. You'll see the writing. It's more like we're casually having a conversation. There's not really a structure to it. Like I do abide by some consistency, but you'll see that it's less formal. This is an informal way of kind of like coaching. So before jumping into it, I throw out some questions here, just something for you to keep in mind while you're reading the analysis. Like, are my hero ranges optimal? How many targets will my heroes hit? How often will the abilities trigger? Coin toss or guarantee? What a balanced APC composition looks like? And lastly, complementary heroes. Each hero has its intended use as offense or support hero, thus you need to complement it accordingly. The possibilities are endless, and remember, work with what you have, not with what you want. So for the hero analysis, for SX to S2, I broke it down by unit choice. So these are all the fighter heroes going from SX down to S2. They include a brief analysis as well as placement and complementary heroes. Then I go into shooter heroes and subsequently vehicle heroes. Then for S1 and the normal orange heroes, the analysis is shorter because these are simpler in nature. There's less to analyze and they're not as useful as the later seasons anyways. So these are more condensed, and I grouped some of the S1 heroes together as well. These 3 go together, these 3 go together because they have very similar skills. It's only 1 or 2 skills that differentiate between them. And then these are the normal orange heroes with very brief analysis, 1 line, just a few words here and there. Lastly, I cover hero synergy, which basically touches on which heroes complement each other, what you guys should be looking for when you build your APCs. This is where everything comes together. You have to take into consideration the attributes, the skills, the triggering frequencies, the buffs, the debuffs, the abilities, the combos. Everything comes into play here. Everything in the first 38 pages of this guide comes into play now, as you build your APC. So these are just a few examples for possible combinations. So example for fighters, you can have Recover with damage, which is Tech Priestess in the front, the Knight in the middle, and Venom Walker in the back. Or for shooters, you can have Sober, Recover, and Damage, which is Deus Ex Machina, the Patriot, and Hummingbird. And for vehicles, you can have AoE with Suppression and Damage, which has Panther in the front, Major Anastasia in the middle, and Captain Ivanov in the back. And then on the following pages, I just copy their skills down here again, just to make things easier to view the potential of these APCs. And that pretty much concludes my guide. As I mentioned earlier, this guide is not for everyone. It's probably too much for casual players. However, if you do manage to get to the end of this guide reading everything, I think it's safe to say that you are not a casual player. You are a hardcore player and you strive to be better than the rest. That said, please do not withhold knowledge. I made this guide to educate everybody in the LSS community. Knowledge should be shared with everyone. If you meet someone that needs help, help them. Give them this guide, or give them my website or my YouTube channel. So until next time, I wish you all the best in discovering your best APC composition.